We have a couple of our staff members, and Josh is here doing many things as well as all of the technology, and thank you for doing that for us tonight. Superintendent.
Well, thank you. Good evening. I know that we are live streaming, so we're assuming there's lots of people watching at home or will watch this recorded session at a later date. And we want to thank everyone who is participating in this meeting for taking the time to join us. Your presence speaks to the value that you place on public education and on ensuring that our schools remain vibrant, sustainable, and responsive to the needs of our students both today and long into the future. Tonight's session has two primary purposes. The first is to begin the process of the 25-26 budget process for the 26-27 school year budget. This is earlier than we have done so, and it is a reflection of our desire to increase transparency, collaboration, and to ensure that we align the budget process and all decisions related to the budget to ensure that they reflect district values and the design principles of the strategic plan. As a public school district, every decision we make about resources must balance fiscal responsibility with our commitment to student success, staff support, and equity across our schools. Any questions, ideas, and lived experiences help inform us and help us understand the impacts of these decisions. Second, we are here tonight to engage on the first steps in the development of the long-range facilities plan, which is a framework that guides how we care for, modernize, and plan for the spaces where learning occurs. This is more than about buildings. It is about belonging, about creating safe, inclusive, and equitable, flexible learning environments that support the diverse learners in the Comox Valley schools now and long into the future. As many of you know, our community is growing and changing. Enrollment pressures, aging infrastructure, seismic needs, emerging program priorities all intersect. The long-range facilities plan helps us look ahead with a coherent strategy so that the decisions we make each year are part of a larger cohesive plan. The work is complex and it affects every family, student, and staff member in our district, which is why participation matters. We want to hear what people value, what concerns you, and what aspirations you have for the future of our schools. I want to thank our Board of Education for their leadership, our staff, particularly Jennifer Nelson, Acting Secretary Treasurer, who is stepping in tonight to present, where we'd normally have the Secretary Treasurer, and to Molly Proudfoot, Director of Operations, for your effort and work in preparing for tonight. And thank you to our team of parents that are here tonight to engage with us in such an important process. We look forward to a thoughtful and productive first steps on our budget and the long-range facilities plan.
Thank you. Just for clarification, I believe that anybody watching virtually can email their question for tonight to our communications email. I'm just confirming that that's correct. That it's communications@sd71.bc.ca. So if you have questions, please relay them through that forum, and we will do our best to have them come to us to see if your questions can be answered tonight. And for the folks in the room in person, you will have the opportunity to ask questions after each presentation, and then if there's enough time at the end, any questions that you might have wanted to ask for the first presentation, if there wasn't time, we can try to bundle them all at the end. And then I'm going to ask Jennifer, would you, do you wish to go through your entire presentation and then take questions at the end, or is that a better flow, or questions during?
I think questions during is just fine. It might just allow us to respond as we're touching on it, so I'm fine with that, if that works.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. Are there any questions about the questions? All right. And then whomever is receiving the questions electronically, if they could be forwarded to myself, if and when they're received, it'd be appreciated. Thank you so much.
All right, over to you. Okay, thank you. So once again, my name's Jennifer Nelson, and I'm the Assistant Secretary Treasurer here at the school district. So tonight, we're going to provide a presentation on the proposed 2026-27 budget process. This presentation is built around a draft schedule at this point, so the actual schedule will be reviewed and considered by the board next week at their board meeting. But just wanted to mention that. The presentation does highlight a more robust engagement process starting earlier in the year. The goal tonight is really to provide information and increase transparency and understanding of our annual budget process. So we're going to walk through the timeline, touch on how we build the budget, as well as how we'll be gathering input from our partners and the public during the process this year. So our process is guided by Board Policy 26, which is the financial planning and reporting policy. This can be found in the board policy handbook, which is posted on our website, but just kind of highlighted some of the main items in there. The policy does authorize the superintendent and the secretary treasurer to develop the budget each year. It identifies that funding for mandated educational programs are emphasized, as well as supporting alignment with the strategic priorities. It also outlines that the annual timelines will be established and approved by the board by March of each year, and notes that the main consultation is conducted in open committee of the whole meetings, but may also include other types of consultation. So just highlighting the board's strategic priorities and design principles here, because they are referred to within the financial planning policy. And they are the foundation for us when it comes to developing the budget. And the strategic priorities that were adopted by the board last year were done so after an extensive engagement process. So there were 4 public engagement sessions gathering over 500 detailed responses to online surveys, which were all compiled and considered. The writing team consisted of a diverse group of voices, including students, District Parent Advisory Council, Indigenous Education Council, elders, teachers, support staff, principals, and vice principals, trustees, and the senior leadership team. So very extensive occurred over the course of a year, and now that those are adopted, we have that as our guiding foundation when developing the budget. So in addition, this year, the board is working at developing some budget guiding principles for the 26-27 year. So this is new this year, and these are intended to complement the board policy and the strategic priorities. Sorry, I'm just going to the next page here. So once we have these finalized, they would be posted on our website. But they're intended to provide additional guiding principles so that when decisions are being made, they're clear and understood. And I think that's about it. We haven't provided them yet, but they are in the works and they'll be coming through the budget process. So just wanted to highlight here, we prepared this slide to really illustrate the 2 budget processes that we're dealing with every year. It can be a bit confusing because we interchangeably use the term amended or annual or preliminary. So the intent of this slide is to highlight for you over the course of the year of budget development how we're running 2 processes at any given time. So the top portion of the slide highlights the amended budget or the current year budget, which, so for example, right now we'd be looking at amending the budget that was adopted in June of last year. So you can see that timeline starting in October and flowing all the way through to February 28th, which is when we have to have a adopted bylaw to the ministry. And then on the lower section is the planning for next year or the preliminary annual budget. So you can see how we've got that flowing from November all the way to June 30th, which is when the budget bylaw needs to be adopted. So the little purple star on there, hopefully everybody can see that, that indicates where we are today. So as you can see, the two processes, we're right in the middle of both of them. We're at the planning stage, preparing for next year, and here tonight at our first engagement session. As well as right now, we're analyzing where actual enrollment landed at September 30th. So we're taking last year's or this year's budget that was adopted in June and analyzing what those impacts are, and then working on preparing an analysis and an updated amended budget. So this highlights how we've increased the time span for the annual budget. If you see on the lower section, that purple stage where we're doing the budget planning and the engagement, we normally wouldn't be starting that till January and February, kind of when we're wrapping up the amended, and then doing our engagement in April and March, April-ish. So you can see we've extended that time frame out. So there is more impact in the earlier phase, but it's going to allow for more time. So just touching on the amended process, just to highlight where we are today, and that, you know, we're taking the previous budget, we've got those actual enrollment numbers at September 30th. Those are being submitted to the ministry through what's called the 1701 report. It essentially sends those numbers to the ministry. They then look at our grant and recalculate that based on what those final numbers are, and then submit those back to us through an announcement in December. And that's kind of our initial part where we can start developing that amended budget and bringing it forward to the board in January, February for adoption. And then once we have the final amended budget, we can start rolling it over and working on the next year in March. So this slide here, what we've tried to do is take the proposed timeline, which will be brought forward to the board next week, and sort of try to illustrate it out on a timeline so you could see those key dates and deliverables and how we're going to get from today to June 23rd when the budget will be adopted and we have to have submitted to the ministry. So just highlighting on there, you can see November 18th is where we are tonight. And then once the budget schedule is approved, our next phase would be through February 2nd through March 2nd. We would be doing surveys and some targeted meetings with our partners and starting to gather that feedback for the budget quite early in the process. And then bringing that feedback March 10th. And what that would allow is to have the initial feedback received and considered prior to us even building the budget and moving into the actual work of pulling together the financial implications so that we could have that information in advance. So then that would bring us to April 28th, where we'd be providing an update on the revenue implications based on our enrollment, and then looking at our full annual operating budget position May 12th, with some additional time built in there for further consultation mid-May if needed. And then with the anticipated final draft of the operating budget May 26th and final adoption by June 23rd. So I've made some of the font purple up there to kind of indicate that targeted engagement and consultation, which some of it's new and it's certainly sooner in the process, but just wanting to highlight that. But also all of the other meetings that are open board meetings or committee of the whole, those are still considered engagement and consultation. We certainly, the public is welcome to attend as well as our partners, and we're open for questions during that time too. So there's really engagement occurring all the way through the process. So one of the main drivers of our budget is enrollment. So just wanted to kind of touch on how we come up with those numbers and develop our enrollment projections. It is a collaborative process, which includes several members of the senior leadership team that are communicating and coming together on a regular basis to review. We analyze several data sources. We look at some third-party software provider known as Verigar GeoLiquor, looking at the actual 1701 or ministry reports with registration. Local knowledge is so consulting with our municipal partners around development so we can get an indication of what our those anticipated move-in and development numbers might be. And then also touching base with our principals at all of the schools and receiving that local feedback. So we bring all that data together and we are analyzing school by school and grade to determine what our 3-year enrollment estimates are going to be for the upcoming year. And while we're doing that, we're also looking at space needs. So we've got our director of operations there with us, Molly, and she's helping us determine whether we're going to have enough space and if we need to purchase modulars or move modulars, and that we're utilizing all those facilities to the best we can. So once we have those enrollment projections together, we agree upon them as a group, and we're very, it's really important to get them as close as we can because it really does drive our revenue and expenses for the year. So we try to err on the side of some conservative, but getting as close as we can. And then the Secretary Treasurer reviews, approves, and submits to the ministry by February 15th each year. So here we have just a snapshot of our enrollment over the last 5 years. So those first 5 years up to 24, 25 is actual enrollment. And the 3 last years are the projections that we submitted last February and what our budget is built on. So just wanted to highlight that here for you for information. This is a bit different than some of the other graphs you've seen in the budget presentations in that we've included February and May enrollment that we received from our online student, our NIDES is known as our online school. In the past, we've really only reported out on September because that's our main amount, but the February and May collection of students is starting to become significant. So just thought that we could highlight that. So that's in that blue top portion of those bar graphs. You can see that there. So once we have our enrollment projections, then we get into building the rest of the budget. We look at what are the staffing needs for the number of students we're anticipating, and we adjust accordingly within the budget. We adjust accordingly for collective agreements and contractual wage and benefit increases, any other known contractual service and supply impacts, as well as we're doing detailed department reviews throughout the entire process, looking for trends or areas where we might be able to find some efficiencies or cost savings and adjusting as we can. And then once we have a financial position, a starting point, that's when finance will pull it together and bring it to the senior leadership team for regular review and determine at this point, we may need to be finding some funds or making some adjustments. And as well as if there's any new budget requests coming through, we would vet those against our board policy and strategic priorities and now our guiding principles. And if they align, then we would be able to identify those as potential additions to recommend to the board when bringing the budget forward. So the next few slides are really just based on the current budget. These have been presented all through the previous budget process, but just wanting to highlight and draw attention to how our budget is made up. So these are the revenues. Here you can see the significant reliance on the Ministry of Education and Childcare grant, making up really 96% of our revenue coming in. And that's including the targeted Indigenous education grant that also comes. And then the remaining from our international student tuition, as well as other grants and revenues. And then on the operating expense side, so our operating budget is $132 million. 81% of that's going directly to instruction, with the remaining 12% to operations and maintenance of our facilities, and 2% to transportation or busing, and then 5% to district administration. So of that 132 million, 114.4 million is spent directly on salaries and benefits. So you can see how that's split up. We have 59, actually 60% or 64% going towards our teachers. That includes TOCs and substitutes. And the operating budget funds 540 FTE for teachers. And then we've broken that down further so you can see the remaining 13% is spent for support staff, 9% for educational assistants or EAs, 8% for principals and vice principals, and then 6% for other professionals. The remaining 17.5 million in operating is spent on services and supplies. And so we've just broken that down here into another pie graph for you so you can see those types of supplies, utilities, student transportation, Pro-D and travel, and then all other services and supplies used to maintain our facility and operations across the district. So in addition to the operating revenues and expenses, we're also including special purpose funds in our budget. So these are specific funds that are specifically targeted, and they are externally restricted. So we're limited to what we can do with these funds. And as you can see here, so we're in this current budget, there's about $20 million. With the majority of those funds also coming from the Ministry of Education and Childcare. So just to know, each one of those that the ministry provides to us, we do have to have its own special budget that's tracked, reported to the ministry on a regular basis. So they are quite cumbersome and limited as to what we can do with them. But they do make up a significant portion. And they also do fund 149 FTE across the district as well, so we're noteworthy for sure. The district budget also includes funds for capital. These support our infrastructure, technology, and equipment. The majority coming from the ministry through applications or capital plan submissions each year. So we apply for major and minor capital in June and September through regular submissions for the year ahead. So once we submit those, we hear usually in March as to which projects have been approved, and then we include them within our budget. And that includes items for seismic expansion, replacement, other items for building envelope, infrastructure, playground equipment, and school enhancements. So another component of capital, which is referred to as local capital, includes items like fleet, technology, furniture and equipment, and modulars. And the ministry does not provide funding for these expenses, so we do have to transfer from our operating fund each year to fund these. So in this current school year, the budget includes a transfer of 1.47 million to support this, and that works out to about 1.4% of our whole budget. So the board, through policy 18, maintains a contingency reserve that helps to manage unexpected costs and maintain financial stability. The current policy identifies the minimum amount as 1.5% to a maximum of 3% of the annual operating expenses in the fiscal year. And that contingency reserve currently sits at $3.8 million or 3%. So it's at its maximum level at this point, which is excellent. And so that really does support those unexpected events. Like an example could be if enrollment came in significantly lower than anticipated and there's time required to make adjustments. That contingency reserve is there to support, as well as any other significant weather event or a pandemic, cyber incident. That is where the district would need to rely on some of those funds to support through those. And the final component is the multi-year financial planning. So this is done in conjunction with the budget process. I didn't include it in our time frame because there is no bylaw that's specifically required for this, but it is a significant component as well. And once we have our annual budget finalized each year, we then start doing projections out in 2 years, 2 and 3, so that we can see how that's going to look into the future. So they are very high level, built off those enrollment projections that we already submitted to the ministry. High level forecasts, they are challenging because the ministry doesn't provide us with any information to do those projections. So ultimately, they set and establish the per pupil rates and the amount of funds we're going to get. So there's a lot of estimating involved, but it is certainly a good tool to use to align our strategic priorities financially and see how those decisions today are going to impact us into the future and allow us to plan ahead. So it is an important document and also requires us to submit by the 30th of September each year. So all of our budget information for past years, multi-year financial plans, our budget bylaws, as well as all the presentations and reports that we provide through the process are loaded onto our website and available. Once we do have an approved 26-27 schedule, we will launch a new engagement page that will highlight our timelines, upcoming meetings, and we will post all updated presentations and reports there and launch our surveys from that site. Just want to thank everybody for their time listening to me tonight. And certainly we did provide here for those that are with us forms that you're certainly welcome to fill out with your feedback and leave with us. And if you choose to take them with you and fill them out, you can email them back to us. Just some feedback around the process. And we're certainly happy to receive that. Thank you.
Just checking to see if there's any electronic questions.
Questions pertaining to the topic.
Pardon me?
No questions pertaining to the topic.
To the topic? Okay. All right. And I guess I don't need to gather those or not. Seems like you don't have any questions about that. Yeah, that's totally great. And just checking if anyone in the room has a question on any of the information that you've received tonight. It is great plan to navigate questions tonight, so.
I have one question, if it's okay. When you're talking about some of the forecasting that you all do for the multi-year, do you have like a program that sort of does some of that? Like, is there like a software that you use, or do you guys do that work yourselves?
So the forecasting out into the future years, we built our own template and do it in Excel. And we just find it works best for us. It's the most efficient and yeah, we do have specific budget software though, when we're getting into the annual budgets. But then we summarize that and take it out for forecasting.
Cool, thanks.
I know, did it, oh, there are hands down here. So Chelsea, then Shannon.
I was just curious with surveys done in the past, and you may have said this, I apologize, but something like the 500 responses received in this past school year, are those then sort of stored and revisited when considerations are coming for in a process of rolling over to the next budget? And I would just be curious of how that sort of works. Does senior leadership go through that type of past data when surplus considerations are coming?
Yeah, so the 500 responses was actually for the strategic plan. So that,
Sorry.
but that is okay because the strategic plan is our guiding document when we're preparing the budget. That's why we mention it because that engagement process really only occurred once.
Right.
And that's where we have those guiding values now that we work off of to build the budget every year. So yes, they are considered through that. Any budget surveys that we launch each year and collect that feedback, yes, we do keep that and we refer to that. And so we will still have like last year's information as well, but we'll also be collecting this year's and we won't be necessarily bringing it back into the public again, but it's always there when we're going through those budget priorities that come in.
Yeah, I have a question. Just start with, I'd like to thank you I appreciate the layering of the different steps each year, looking both forward, but then also back. I think certainly when I started as a trustee, the amount of financial information that came at us, and I'm sure it was clearly presented, but also it's really lovely to see it all together and look like the entire year-long time frame. I am curious, based on last year, there's reference a number of places to getting feedback from the public, both in engagement groups, but also through like the survey. And I'm wondering kind of specifically where in the process we would be looking for like feedback specifically from our partner groups rather than individuals through a survey. And then also like from trustees, is that something that, is there a specific meeting that comes at, or are we to also submit survey responses?
Yeah, so the proposed plan for this year would include having meetings, inviting partners to individual meetings to gather their priorities in February. So that would be happening, and we would be gathering any feedback and summarizing that to bring back to the board through engagement sessions or committee of the whole. In terms of trustee feedback, I mean, trustees would certainly be welcome to fill out surveys, but also having that input through those committee of the whole, I would think, is that at any of the venues throughout the process.
So you're asking if trustees are going to have a specific opportunity with time with all trustees together or individually to submit feedback? Or just
Or open-ended, like at what point in the various months of collecting information is the point at which, that it all comes to us and we weigh in as well?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I think, ultimately, this is where that complexity of governance and operations starts to interact. And I think typically through the budget process, trustees should be informed, and all of the information that comes from every consultation should be brought forward to trustees to make the final decision. And that's where trustees input. And ultimately, that is where trustees will ask those deep questions around alignment with the strategic plan, with the values that have been clearly articulated. And so typically in the budget consultation process, trustees aren't consulted about the budget. They make the final decisions based on all of the consultation.
Sorry, a quick follow-up. That's,
Okay, yeah, and then we just have, go ahead.
I'm just curious, is that something that the superintendent reaches out to partner groups, or is that something that is acting secretary treasurer that you'll be doing?
Actually, yes, we'll be reaching out.
You're both,
That's both, that's me.
Both of
That's
me?
both of you. Yes, and I think when we've actually, what you don't see is the very specific intentions in terms of all of the partner groups and where those pieces are, and those are invitations that we're going to get out once trustees have approved the budget plan. And so, and that includes Student Voice, PDP, IEC, DPAC, CDTA, CUPE, so a really comprehensive, I'm sure I've missed somebody, but it will make sure that we don't miss anybody in that invitation, and that we're really specific and strategic. So rather than, doing a general presentation and then having occasional other conversations, we're going to just really intentionally have specific conversations as well as larger.
And Megan.
So on the bottom of one of the slides, it mentions something along the lines of budget priorities that may be temporary in nature may be considered for surplus. And I was just wondering if you could expand on how you would expand on that sort of mindset, and then also maybe give a rationale for how you would define some priorities as temporary.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So when there's surplus funds, we want to still address budget priorities that have been identified through the budget process. Surplus funds we're not usually aware of, we don't have confirmation of till the fall. With that in mind, why we say temporary, it's not necessarily that we'll be addressing a priority that is only a temporary priority, but because we can't place it into the operating budget, it means that particularly if it's connected to staffing, needs to be term specific. So why we say temporary is because something in the operating budget, it's there, it's built in. So unless we make a decision to change it, it's funded for as long as we have that enrollment. And so things, oftentimes single item purchases. So for example, if we had a major furniture piece that needed to be, that's an ideal use of surplus because it's a one-time purchase and then it satisfies that piece. Where we sometimes have some tension with the surplus budget is when we bring in staffing. The staffing is valued, it's addressing a need, but because it's not in the operating budget, it has to be a term specific.
I think what we'll do now is we'll pause any more budget-related questions and give folks time to think about that, and then move on to the long-range facility planning overview presentation. And have an opportunity to have any of those questions addressed, and then any further budget questions that may be coming electronically or in person. And Jennifer, thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Molly Proudfoot, the Director of Operations, and what we're going to talk to you about tonight is the long-range facility plan, and essentially kind of what it is, what it does for the district, sort of the process behind it. We're very early days in updating it, so this is just a level overview of kind of what to expect. Okay, so what is a long-range facilities plan? So it's simply a strategic roadmap for the school district. It's typically a minimum of a 10-year cycle, which the school districts opt for those 10 years. It can go up to 20. The last time the school district did one was in 2021, so that was 2021 to 2031, which now doesn't feel that far away, but at the time it did. And there's been obviously a lot of changes, and we're in 2025 now, so we're due for an update. So these are the things that are factored in. You know, you have your facilities, you also have your educational goals, and then you have your growth, or the other end of that is your potential decline in your enrollment. So this plan is to ensure that those three things align with the infrastructure and investments that the school district makes. So it's an informed planning tool, kind of first and foremost. It's a flexible framework, so it's not, you know, hard and fast, you have to do this. It has recommendations, and it is dynamic because it changes every year. But it does help with resource allocation to maintain safe, functional, and supportive learning environments. So the purpose of an LRFP, so to kind of continue on that note, it's a decision-making framework. So it prioritizes the managing of our school facilities. So that's inclusive of the buildings and the grounds that they are on. And you use that and you compare it against your demographic trends, your facility condition assessments, your utilization data, and that helps you make informed decisions about what you spend and when you spend it. So this is an important one. We also need it to align with the strategic plan. We have an updated strategic plan, so it is timely that we're updating this document to incorporate that and ensure that our infrastructure planning aligns with that strategic plan. And it also supports our capital funding requests. So it is a ministry guideline document they issue, and it's about a 9-page document, so it's kind of high level. But we also use it to support our 5-year capital submission that we do every year to the ministry. So they look for if the requests that you're making in those submissions are reflected in your long-range facility plan. So what is it made up of? So there's us, there's who we are, which is the school district organization, and that includes your geographic diversity. So the Comox Valley is unique in that we have quite a bit of urban and rural communities. Your school and student profile, so that's all of your schools, including your alternate schools, your programs, that serve all of our diverse learners. Your demographics, so you have shifts in population, growth, decline, your aging infrastructure, all of which affect your needs in your facilities, as well as your catchment planning. So that's your boundaries for your schools. And then the strategic plan alignment is about outlining the district goals that are essential for kind of the foundation of this document. The other thing is current and future educational programs. So what that breaks down to is essentially what our programs are, where they're located, and what are the gaps, if there are any. Enrollment projections is a big one. So because it's a 10-year plan, you're looking at a 10-year forecast. So what those projections rely on are historical trends, your birth rates, your migration, your new housing developments for accuracy. So then it helps you analyze your growth and decline. So if you're expecting growth or decline in a certain catchment zone, that will help you make informed decisions. Yes, and it also helps identify if there's overcrowding or underuse in certain facilities, which are then linked to potential requests that we would make to the ministry. So this is just a sample. It's out of date, so don't zoom in. But it's our Baragar with our, and this is without local knowledge, so that's a very important thing to note. So Baragar factors in your census information, kind of all that boring stuff. It doesn't really factor in what your community is doing on the ground. So like your OCPs, your developments that are happening. So in the long range facilities plan, what we'll be doing is we'll be applying that local knowledge. So there's data inputs like anonymized school district location information, housing data that are pulled from BC assessments. We also look at the municipal OCPs, which the Comox Valley is brutal because we have a lot of municipalities. So we have a lot of OCPs to review, but that as well as just one-on-one conversations with school district staff and municipal planners. And that all goes into kind of creating what we have as a development map to kind of let us know what are sort of the real growth areas of developments in the valley. So things that are not, we don't so much concern ourselves with rezoning because it's a long way away from development, but more if it's zoned and there's a development permit in the queue. We want to focus on that. So what this helps create is, this is also an example, which is out of date, but it's essentially a heat map. So it kind of lets us know where those growth areas are. And we usually hone in on, you know, the K-7 and then the secondary. So it kind of shows, okay, we got red kind of happening in Cumberland, red happening in Aspen Park. Because of when this was done, this factored in largely to the submissions that we made to the ministry about the Aspen Park prefab addition and the Cumberland expansion project, which were both approved and are in construction.
Can I stop and
Yeah.
ask a question? That density report there, was that something that you submitted when you were submitting the capital project information? Like, is that sort of when that's from, like within the last kind of 48 months?
So this was actually done kind of
24 months,
in
right?
between when the long range facilities plan was completed and now, because a lot of growth happened because it was 2021 and it was kind of post-COVID. That's when we engaged that Liquor Geospatial
Yes.
to kind of update us on where we were at.
Yep.
So this was a big factor in the submissions that went into the ministry.
So you kind of made this and that document that you showed us before.
Yeah.
that sort of interactive document.
Yeah, and you don't so much provide like this graphic to the ministry, but in your submission, you
Right.
pull out the information that's pertinent
Yeah.
to your submission, yeah.
Thank you.
Then another core component is capacity versus utilization. And what that essentially means is how big your facilities are. So how many kiddos can it hold? There's operating capacity and nominal capacity. So nominal is kind of your baseline subscription that the ministry dictates, 25 kids for elementary, whereas operating is kind of real world, boots on the ground. This is actually how many kids can fit in this space. So what we can see here by the graphic up at the top, there is a legend. This is also out of date. So just for illustration purposes only. You'll see in the teal is your total capacity, so how much your school can hold. In the orange bubble is the predicted 10-year enrollment, which at the time this was done, this was 2032, and where your current enrollment is at. So you can kind of, it's a spot check to determine how well you're doing. You don't want the red to go outside of the teal, is the rule.
Is the capacity, does that include the modulars on site?
Yeah, good question. So operating would, nominal wouldn't. And when you're making capital submissions to the ministry, they don't want to factor in your portables for how big your space is. It does improve your chances, however, because they are looking to eliminate portables on site. So if you have, like we have at Cumberland, 6 portables, that shows, wow, like you guys are really at beyond your ceiling. So then the other component is your existing infrastructure. So this is your building overview. This includes your age, your size, your use, and your specialized educational space for all school buildings in the district. And what this boils down to is what's called a facility condition assessment. Presently, the ministry has a contract with VFA, which when we go to this side, you'll see kind of an example of what a facility condition assessment looks like for one of our schools. And they break it down, assets and systems, and they give you what's called a facility condition index score. If you have a brand new building, it's 0. And then if your building's older, it goes up. If you replace things, it goes down. So it's always moving. But the lower FCI you have, the better shape your conditions are in. So then this is a slide of what it breaks down to in your building systems. So they have this code, it's called the Uniformat code, and they break down everything from exterior doors to air handling units, you name it. And they do assessments every 5 years. So the last one we had was in 2021. So we're kind of due for an assessment in 2026, which would line up well with the long-range facility plan. So this is even more granular. It gets into what one of those systems looks like. So you have your door assembly here. It lets you know when it was installed. They prescribe the amount of years a system like that should live for, essentially. And then when they do those inspections, it will increase actually. Okay, you're reaching your end of life, prescribed life, but it's in pretty good shape. So we're going to add another, 5 years onto that system. And what this helps us do is determine kind of where our weak points are, and that helps us target our projects. Yeah.
If I may, it may not be on this screen, but how does a concern around accessibility or
Yeah.
something, how does that play into a score? If you
Great
don't mind
question.
answering.
Yeah. So what they have is called requirements. So when the inspections are going through, they're looking at if your buildings are essentially up to code, and they will identify those components as accessibility components. So then those are high priority requirements. So then the other aspect that falls into this is the seismic mitigation. So the LRFP would identify schools with high-risk seismic blocks that are candidates for potential upgrades or replacements. And this all factors into the justifying the funding requests that we put forward for our infrastructure upgrades. So then the other component is the transportation of students. So they want an overview, essentially what your busing catchments are, what your busing criteria is. And with those 10-year projections, you can also forecast if you're going to have an increase in ridership or a decrease in ridership. And that will be directly linked to either adding routes or taking away routes, which has a financial component. Then there's a community use overview. So they want to know your spaces that are being used for childcare, educational societies like neighborhood learning centers. And this also includes use of your school facilities and grounds after hours. So your external user groups, they kind of want to know how your facilities are being used 24/7. And then there's the public engagement, which is what we're doing here tonight. And there will be more to come on that. We're currently have our long-range facility plan out for a request for proposal with a consultant. So once we have a consultant engaged, we'll start to create more of a timeline for when that engagement can happen. So you factor all of these things together, and what it will give you is some recommendations in that 10-year span. You know, we're kind of looking at your 1 to 2 to 5 to 10-year recommendations for those capital projects or ways that you can optimize your school space. So this slide is to just kind of let you all know what the proposed schedule is. We're planning on awarding the consultant in mid-December of this year. Planning engagement work to start in early January and go to the end of the school year. Targeting hopefully a presentation of a draft before the end of the school year as well. And then realistically, there'll be revisions to that and further work that could take us into fall of 2026. Yeah, and that's kind of the end of my slides. So I'm happy to answer more questions.
Are there anything online that pertains to this topic?
One question that I'll work with staff on as well.
Okay, great, thank you. And just checking if any of the folks in the room have a question. All right, go ahead, Megan.
At one of our BCCPAC conferences, which is the BC Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils, one of the representatives from the 911 that recently won an award for their long-range facilities plan.
Yeah.
So I was curious if you could maybe give, considering that there's maybe potential outside rankings, if you could give like what, if you know about those awards and like what constitutes winning an award, and when you're building these, if you look at other districts and have like some best practices that we could look at.
Well, I didn't know that I could potentially win an award, so that changes things. I know, yeah, our neighbors, we have like a low-key competition with the NIMO, so. I'm not aware of the award in which you speak, but we do reference other long-range facility plans, and I have looked at Nanaimo's and respect to them. I liked the way it was put together. So it is, yeah, we're all out there doing the same thing. So it is a helpful resource in kind of determining the direction you want to go. The last long-range facility plan that was done was quite a cumbersome, okay, you've seen it, a cumbersome document. So the direction we're wanting to go is it being a little, something more dynamic, less cumbersome, so it can be updated on a more regular basis. And Nanaimo's does fit that bill, you know, it's like a 25-page document. So, yeah.
We have a question now, great. Thanks, Jen.
I'm thinking back to the strategic plan and a lot of the feedback that came in from community regarding that. There was a lot of this, I can remember a lot of communication regarding kind of long-range facilities plan stuff. So I'm just curious how much you guys are going back and reviewing that to see what the community said then and how that is shaping kind of some fresh ideas going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that we obviously aren't going to take an eraser to the feedback that we've received so far. That's, you know, what we would call as current. So once the consultant's engaged, that would be something that we would share with them and would be a great starting point for us.
Yeah, I'm curious if energy efficiency and our buildings moving forward is a factor at all in our long-range facilities plan and our energy intensity with things like moving codes to net zero and things like that. I was wondering if I didn't see any of that identified, so I didn't know if that's on our radar or not.
Totally. So, I mean, within the long-range facilities plan, we'll be looking at kind of creating what our strategic priorities are and connecting those to the school district strategic plan. But a huge part of that is energy efficiency and sustainability. So, that will be a part of the further engagement that's to come, is kind of laying out sort of what those LRFP strategic priorities are. But I can tell you, energy will be there.
Here, thanks.
I
Sarah,
was
just
poking around the Beauregard site, and it talked about, it's got like a staff allocator, which can help school districts create efficient, cost-effective teaching assignments at the elementary level. That's not something that we would use Beauregard for necessarily.
We haven't.
Okay, thank you. That's right. Just had to figure that.
thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
It's great to just have a good foundation at the beginning of the long-range facility process for those that are curious and potentially to be more involved later on. So,
Yeah.
in tying in the budget and long-range facility plan is so pretty significant sections of the decision-making and planning that need to happen in order for us to do our best for our students in our school district. So thank you.
I think it'll be really cool to see in June or later when everything kind of happens. And I think for public too, to like see, it's always, some things that we have and some goals we have as a district in other areas, it's really easy to see how things tie to the plan. So it'll be really cool to see like the creative ways that you can explain to us in sort of more layman terms how that happens for your department. It's going to be exciting to see the outcomes of what happens once you get all that work done. So good luck.
Excited too. I'm glad you guys are.
And we recognize that that while you're sharing with us tonight, that both of you have great teams that are working with you behind the scenes. And some here tonight, so thank you, to be able to pull all of this work together to create a great base, I hope, for public who want to watch the video at their leisure to refresh themselves on both of these processes. So thank you for having us. And for those that attended virtually or in person, thank you very much for your time and your questions and your interest in an area that not everybody gets excited about. But again, we're certainly parts of the big pieces of how we're able to do our work. And with that, Jeremy, do you have any final thoughts?
No, just thank you to Molly and to Jennifer and to participants.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you all.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Kendra.